Hello and welcome to Where Are They Now with Mario Toneguzzi on Megapix Media. Joining me today is Jane Adolphe, who is a former University of Calgary Dinosaur basketball player and Canadian national team member. Thanks, Jane, for joining us today.
Thank you, Mario, for having me.
Well, bring us up to date, Jane, on what you are doing these days.
Yes, so just one clarification. I made only the national B team and I was an alternate, so unfortunately not the A. But I'm a professor of law at Ave Maria School of Law in Naples, Florida, and have been since 2001.
Okay, super. Now, you have had a strong connection over the years to the Vatican. Maybe you can explain your role and connection at the Vatican. And for people who don't really understand, maybe talk a little bit about what the Vatican is and what it does.
Okay, so the Vatican is a term often used to refer to the Pope as the leader of the Catholic Church. It's used in an analogous way to how some use Washington or the White House to refer to the American federal government. So the Vatican, while commonly used, is not entirely correct as a term. The Holy See is the proper term in international law when referring to the Pope. And the Holy See means the Pope in the narrow sense or the Pope in the broader sense and his departments. The Holy See is a subject of international law. It has a capacity to enter into diplomatic relations with states. And Vatican is really, when we refer to the Vatican, I suppose in the short term, you would be talking about Vatican City State, which is a territory that was created through a treaty between the Holy See and in brackets, the Pope and Italy. And that was done in 1929. The Holy See and Vatican City State are separate entities, but they're related to the Catholic Church. And we Catholics believe that the Catholic Church was established by Jesus Christ, whose vicar on earth is the Pope. And so the Church is both a visible and visible reality, and it transcends territorial limits, and it's distinct from Vatican City State and distinct from the Holy See.
Okay, and can you explain your connection to all that over the years?
Okay, so from 2003 to 2011, I was invited to participate as a member of various Holy See delegations to the United Nations meetings. And so the Holy See is analogous to Canada, analogous to the United States. But it's one person, and it participates in the international community and creates laws and treaties, just like Canada does or the United States. And so I was asked to participate as a diplomat on its delegations to these various meetings. I did that. I was more of a consultant for, I suppose you could say outside consultant as well, to John Paul II and to Pope Benedict XVI. And then I was brought inside inside the Holy See to work for the Secretariat of State's second section, and that's a section that deals with relations with states. And I was serving as an expert within that section, assisting the diplomatic service of the Holy See. So I entered at the end of the papacy of Pope Benedict XVI, lived in Rome, and worked in the Apostolic Palace in Vatican City State until I resigned in 2020.
Okay. Over that period of time, did you ever personally meet the Pope?
Yeah, so I was in meetings with Pope Benedict XVI, but never met him in the meeting. And I've met the Pope multiple times, once in the offices of the Secretary of State, twice as after his private masses in the hotel in Vatican City State. And then several times he would just show up in the hallways of the Apostolic Palace to greet us on different feast days. And that would be very spontaneous. And we'd hear that he was upstairs, and then we'd go upstairs and see him.
Okay. What can you tell me about your basketball career with the Dinos and the things you learned during your career as an athlete that have helped you now in your career?
I would say that I learned 5 lessons. And each of these, I think they're a little, can be reduced to slogans, a Nike-like slogan. So the first one would be the pursuit of excellence. should guide one in whatever he or she does. That slogan we've heard before, go big or go home. Another one would be hard work pays off. And so another slogan we're familiar with is no pain, no gain. The third one was compete against yourself. And I would say that if you wanted to reduce that to a slogan, it would be the better version of yourself each day. Fourth, I would speak about winning and success is not about getting up and receiving trophies. It's more about how one reacts to weakness, failure, and fear. And that slogan could be reduced to get up and dust yourself off. And of course, the fifth relates to the politics of the sport. And politics are always relevant when one is not the Michael Jordan of his or her sport. And so at that point, I think you'd have to, if you reduce it to a slogan, it would be don't sweat the things you can't control. So those would be the 5 highlight principles, I suppose.
Okay. And when you you look at your career in basketball, a lot of highlights there. What do you consider, though, what your highlights were when as a playing?
Yeah, so there were a number of games in my 5th year where I played in what could be described as the zone. And it's that space that seems to transcend time and place, where the mind is calm, muscle memory takes over, and the body just feels no fatigue.
Yeah.
And you play in a situation where you're shooting the ball, for example, and you don't even remember seeing the hoop. And so I played before the 3-point line. I think it came in the year after I finished my stint at University of Calgary, and I scored 30 points on a couple of occasions where it was double teamed, and the double teamed pushes you to react quicker and do things more skillfully and precise. And so within that type of heated play, you're able to actually play to the way I wanted to play. I had a picture of how I wanted to play, and that's the level that you're of excellence, I think, that you're able to get to. I think the funniest moment, though, came during a game in the University of Victoria, where there's this Viking mascot going up and down the sidelines, and he was taunting me, and I remember shooting and scoring, and almost from where he stood, actually, and then turned around and said something to the effect, "In your face." I think the daily newspaper caught that moment. That was quite a funny moment. And then getting back to the zone experience, what's kind of amazing is I encountered it on my travels after the fact. When you go to these masterpieces in museums and churches, and you're standing before these great works of art, and you see that the artist had created such beauty that artist must have been in the zone. So
yeah,
I think in a nutshell, I mean, that's basically some of the high points.
Okay. And as an athlete, obviously, people, you guys always hit the valley as well, right? When you look back at your career, what would you consider, say, your biggest disappointment when you played basketball?
Right. So I think I could say the best of times and the worst of times came at the age of 19. So really early on in my career. So at 19, I was chosen along with 3 others from Calgary, the University of Calgary, to attend a Canadian national team training camp. I think at the beginning there was about 80 of us. And then after a week, we were reduced to about 30 to play and try out for another 2 weeks. Janis Paskovich and I made the cut, and we remained. And then during the last 10 minutes of the 3-week camp, basically the additional 2 weeks, I drove in and suffered a Charlie horse and limped off to the training room. And the national head coach, I believe his last name was McRae, came in and asked the trainer about my injury, to which the trainer replied, she's out for a month. And McRae turned to me and said, "I'm sorry, I was going to take you." And that was the national, A team. That was my shot. And I didn't realize it. But later tryouts, I would never make the team because the coach at those times wanted bigger players, weren't looking for what I could offer, those sort of things. And before leaving the training camp, I asked him whether I could try out for the national B team that was taking place later in the summer. He said, yes, gave me a positive reply. I showed up at that training camp. I thought I played pretty well. And at the end of the tryouts, I was selected only as an alternative. And this is for the national B team. And I accepted that. But when I entered into there's an ante room into the training room and no one could see who was entering. I overheard the players talking to the effect, do you believe it? Adolphe is only an alternate. And at that point, you realize that you played well enough, certainly in the eyes of other players, to make the national B team, but that politics had entered into the decision. The coach of the national B team had made a decision to take her own players, her own guards, to develop those players at the national B tournament. And so again, I mean, this is the learning experience. I wasn't the Michael Jordan of the sport, and politics came into play. Disappointing, but a great life learning moment.
Yeah, exactly. Now, the U of C has had a strong program for a number of years. Strong athletics program, but very strong basketball program, and the women back at your day were very successful. What were the reasons behind that success, do you think?
Yeah, I would put it to three reasons. Number one, we had an outstanding program with full support of the university. Number two, Donna Radakis was a great coach. She worked for me. She encouraged us to be aggressive on the court, ladies off the court. She was a great female model who did not believe we had to look like men or talk like men in order to play well and be taken seriously as athletes. Number three, we had a group of outstanding female athletes and role models, hard workers with integrity and grit, who understood the pursuit of excellence. Most notably, I played with Janice Paskovich and Julie Hendricks. Now, Janice played in the national team for years, and Julie, a pure athlete, could have made the national team in a number of sports, but she had other goals. But these two women are incredible persons above anything else.
Yeah, exactly. Now, I understand, Jane, that both your parents have passed away. Your mom in 2018, your father just fairly recently here. And what did you learn from them? And that influenced your both of your careers, whether it's basketball or whether it is you do now.
Yeah, so I was born and raised in a Catholic family of 7 children, 4 girls and 3 boys. All the girls played competitive sports, and Mom spent much time educating us about the dignity of femininity, so which include grooming, appropriate attire, and so forth. And perhaps she did this to counterbalance what she viewed as the sloppy sports attire and overly aggressive daughters. She was devoutly Catholic, always discreet and classy, and her attention to these details, I think, served us girls all well. Dad was chief crown prosecutor of the city of Calgary. He was leading most of the murder trials at that point, the heavy trials. And then later he was a provincial court judge in the criminal division. And I followed in his footsteps in the sense of a career. I went to law school and even worked at the Crown Prosecutor's office. I was there for a couple of months right before he retired from the provincial as a provincial court judge. Mm-hmm. He was a good and holy father who paid much attention to his faith through study and reflection and prayer. And his spiritual and intellectual interests and pursuits really left an enduring impression on my soul. So that would be my reflections on my mom and dad.
Okay, super. Well, thanks a lot for joining us today, Jane.
Thank you, Maury. I really appreciate it.
Okay, super. That was Jane Adolphe, who is a former University of Calgary Dinos basketball star and currently professor of law at the Ave Maria School of Law in the US. This has been Where Are They Now with Mario Toneguzzi on Megapix Media. Thanks for joining us today.